Hi everyone, we're just waiting for a few more people to log in. Hi, welcome. First, I'd like to start by making an acknowledgement to country. Today, I'm located on Darawal Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge with deep respect the traditional custodians of this land, the Wadi Wadi people. I pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging, and to the Aboriginal community that continue to care for country. I stand for a future that profoundly respects and acknowledges Aboriginal perspectives, culture, language, and history, and a continued effort to fight for Aboriginal justice and rights, paving the way for a strong future. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sarah O'Shea. I'm the Director of the National Centre for Student Equity in Higher Education, NESHE for short. NESHE is housed at Curtin University in WA, funded by the Commonwealth Government, with a dedicated mission to improve the higher education outcomes, access, participation, retention, success and completion rates for marginalised and disadvantaged people through a variety of strategies, including research, practice and policy. We are really excited today to have Kylie Austin and Meg Smith present. Kylie and Meg are both working in student equity and outreach with UOW, it's the University of Wollongong, and in the last months have had to perform a rapid pivot to online delivery for all their outreach work. We invited them today to share their learnings about this transformation and provide insights or lessons learned. However, before we begin, just a few housekeeping details. This webinar is being live captioned by Bradley Reporting and will be recorded. The recording will be available on the NESHE website in the coming days. In fact, it's generally in the coming hours. To activate the closed captions, click the CC button in the toolbar that is located either on the top or the bottom of your screen. We also have captions available via browser. Nina will add that to the chat pod now. If you have any technological difficulties, please email neshe@curtin.edu.au. The discussion and presentation will run for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we're going to have time at the end, about 10 minutes for questions. But throughout the presentation, please feel free to enter the chat pod and chat with us by choosing all panelists and attendees. But if you have a question for the panel, please add that question to the Q&A box. You can also vote on the questions posed by others. We've also received some questions from participants already, so if we have time, I will ask these as well. Okay, over to you, Kylie and Meg.
Thanks so much, Sarah, and thank you everyone for having us today. It's fantastic to see some familiar faces in the audience. So today, Meg and I are going to be sharing our experiences over the last 2 months in terms of shifting our widening participation and outreach practices into an online environment. And we acknowledge that this is happening right across the sector at the moment. And so I guess we're just really sharing the challenges, the highlights, and some key insights into practice and onboarding your institution to these practices over the next hour, acknowledging that there's other fantastic work already happening across the sector at the moment as well. So just to tell you guys a little bit about us, so my name's Kylie. I've been working at the University of Wollongong in equity for the last 12 years, and over that period, I've designed, led a range of equity programs. I'm also the president for the Equity Practitioners in Higher Education Australasia, EFIA organisation as well. I have a very strong focus on partnerships and collaboration and how people work together to achieve goals. And so you'll start to see some of these practices that really underpin our values at UOW coming out over the next hour. Meg, over to you to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Meg, I'm the Outreach Manager here at UOW. I've been working in higher education for around 4 years, all of that at the University of Wollongong. And most of that time was really spent in marketing roles with the faculties at UOW. So I've been the Outreach Manager for UOW since July last year. And that just means I'm responsible for working with staff across all of our campuses to deliver outreach and widening participation programs to primary and high school students from equity backgrounds. So we work across the areas of the Illawarra, the New South Wales South Coast, the Southern Highlands, and the Liverpool area as well.
Great, thanks Meg. So just to get us started, I'm just going to give you a bit of context about the region and the university that we're working in, because it's really influenced our practice here at the University of Wollongong. So at UOW, you know, we're still considered very much a regional university, and a university that's very focused on our local community. So the footprint of UOW extends from southwest Sydney, from a campus in Liverpool, over to southern Sydney, down to Wollongong, and then 430 kilometres down the coast. So we've got campuses in Southern Highlands, Shoalhaven, Batemans Bay and Bega. And so that's really informed the footprint of outreach activities at the University of Wollongong over the last 10 years. We are quite a unique university, I guess, in terms of the population and the local region that we're drawing from. So within our local region, we've got one of the highest unemployment rates in regional Australia, and our student population is quite unique. Most of our students, about 50% of our students, are first in their family to go to university. Just over 19% of students are from low SES backgrounds, and 29% move to Wollongong from regional and remote areas to undertake their university studies or attend one of our local regional campuses. And also 2.2% of our students identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, and that percentage of that cohort of Aboriginal students is growing significantly at the University of Wollongong, particularly over the last 2 years. So at UOW, we take a whole of student life cycle approach to student equity. So we start working with students in Year 6, and we have a whole range of programs which Meg will talk to shortly that work with students the whole way through their primary school and high school years. From there, we also have quite a strong transition program, and we work with students in terms of their transition into university, and ensuring that students are well supported to enable their progression throughout university, and if they choose to complete their degree. Our engagement with students extends to well after they finish with us, whether they partially complete their degrees or whether they go on and undertake careers. And so we do continue to engage with students for that kind of 6 months to 2 year period as they finish up their university degrees as well. So very much we take a very much a student life cycle approach across the journey, and outreach is one component of the work that we do.
Yeah, so at UAW, our outreach programs really span students from early primary school through to their post-Year 12 studies, as Kylie was just talking about. You know, we provide programs for students as young as Year 12, as young as Year 2. So we get them coming onto the university campus, sitting in lecture theatres, using our labs and facilities to get creative and to solve problems, and really to start that thought process about what they enjoy, where their passions lie, and really starting to dream big for their future. So the second column, the high school years 7 to 10, those programs are really focused on students to find their interest areas, to identify their strengths, to think about their careers in a broad context. So particularly outside their own lived experience, you know, this university operates in an environment that has traditionally had very traditional kind of careers. So really starting to open up the possibilities for students outside of those traditional careers. We focus on delivering skill building content that helps, you know, set students up for their future academic or their work life. These might include exam study skills, time management modules, critical thinking activities, and really starting to think about the world of work in the 21st century, along with a range of information about post-school choices. The programs tend to be very practical and hands-on, and they're really led by our student mentors. So we have a strong focus on the UN Sustainable Development Goals as part of those programs as well. In the senior high school years, so year 11 and 12, we really focus on the pointy end of the high school stick, which is the HSC and the post-school options. So these programs are really about supporting students to make informed post-school choices by giving them information about pathways, higher education applications, vet study and gap years as all as possibilities. We also ramp up the options for academic support in these programs. So for those who are choosing to come into higher education after their HSC, we make sure that they're well prepared, but also that they have this really realistic expectation of what university might be like for them, because it's such an individual journey for each person. And finally, we have our transition programs, which are all about supporting students from an equity background once they've decided to come into higher education, either through alternative entry programs, scholarships, peer coaching, or activities that help them make a positive connection and learn how to ask for help. Obviously, we've kind of gone very quickly over those programs, so if you'd like to find out more, there's information about those on our Into Uni website. In terms of the challenges with COVID, I'm sure many of you were faced with the same challenges when it hit back in March. In particular, we found that we were operating in a totally new environment in which all spending was under review, especially HEP. So the university was looking really quickly to redeploy funds into programs that supported current students with financial support to help them continue with their studies. So that included new scholarships on the table, IT equipment such as like laptops and internet dongles, and accommodation and catering support. So we were really under pressure to respond quickly to demonstrate where outreach would fit across the institutional agenda in this new environment and what our value was to UOW, but most importantly to the communities that we serve. The timing was such that we had a very small window of opportunity to adapt our programs entirely to suit online delivery. And this was just 3 weeks prior to the school holidays. So schools were confused, communication lines were chaotic. We were obviously not particularly high priority for schools at that point in time, who were really just trying to navigate, the recommendations of state and federal government, as well as the Department of Education. So we had to tread really carefully to let schools know that we were there to support them and that we wanted to consult with them, but to also really make sure that we weren't pushing that too hard. And while all of this was happening, the team was faced with learning a whole bunch of new skills in the digital world. So not just the technical stuff like how to use Zoom, share your screens, turn your computer audio on, but how to create engaging content through online programs, how to record and edit videos, how to write scripts, how to set up multiple Google classrooms and make that accessible to students from like 56 different schools. So a really big challenge for the staff here. And finally, we had the challenge of the unknown. So we didn't know how long this would last for. Would this be a quick response for a really short period of time, or would this change our practice longer term? How would students react? What would the uptake be, and would the schools engage with us?
So one of the things that we really had to do then at this point was pivot our widening participation and outreach programs, whilst really kind of staying true to the ethos of what we were trying to deliver in a face-to-face environment. So what we did within quite a short period of time is put together a proposal in consultation with the schools, our local schools that we were working with, up to our senior executive, to really demonstrate how we were going to deliver remote learning opportunities for students in our local region in the current COVID environment. And what we did was we positioned what that would look like for each year group right across the year. And that was a really critical piece of work that we had to do in terms of maintaining institutional support for outreach, as Meg said, in a time that was there were a lot of competing priorities. And so it was really looking at a lot of the work that had been commissioned as well at that point through the Department of Education. So I know Sarah had done a piece for the Department of Education as well, to really demonstrate how the COVID situation was impacting students in our primary and high schools, how it was going to impact their education and their post-school aspirations beyond COVID, and adjusting the program really to reflect the needs of the schools and the students in our community. And so what we put forward to the senior executive was a revised remote delivery program model that could be delivered for the remainder of the year, but that really demonstrated to schools key learning outcomes in terms of their engagement with us, so that they could see the value of how their continued engagement with their students and the university would continue to add value to their curriculum. and to the development of the students in their schools as well. So this was the model that we put forward, and it really identified a whole range of key programs from year 7 to right up until access to higher education.
So today we're going to use the University Preparation Program as a bit of a case study to talk you through. We've obviously had to pivot across our whole outreach program, so that includes the year 7 to 10 space and also year 11. But in particular, the UPP was a huge program that we had to take online. So we're using that as a case study for today. So I'll refer to it as the UPP throughout the presentation. And it's been running for almost 10 years now. It's been hugely successful with the schools in our area. It's a program for current Year 12 students who think that they might want to go on to uni or TAFE when they finish school, but they recognise that they might need a bit of academic support in their HSC year to help them get the marks that they need for entry. It runs at 6 of our campuses, so in Bega, Batemans Bay, Southern Highlands, Shoalhaven, Wollongong and Liverpool, and usually we'd run the program for 20 weeks with an intake of 400 to 500 students. Across the 20-week program, students usually come to the local campus on a weekly basis for face-to-face sessions with our student mentors, and they have to have an attendance rate of about 80% to pass the program. Initially, the program was designed to offer this really in-depth subject support and mentoring for Year 12 students to really help them maximise marks in subjects that they felt that they weren't performing particularly strongly in. But increasingly over time, the focus of the program has shifted to cover content around softer skills stuff. So like interview skills, exam preparation, like referencing and plagiarism, things that are kind of new to Year 12 students, but really important when they head into university. Accommodation options, particularly for the regional campuses where students are thinking about studying away potentially when they finish school. And this is really where the campuses running the program have really contextualised the content based on the needs of their regional cohort. So it meant that last year, in 2019, we ran the program quite differently in Bega, for example, when you compare it to the program that ran in Liverpool. So this year, bearing in mind that we had, quite a different model last year, we had to really shift it. And with a move into, 100% online environment, we really had to make some fundamental changes to the program structure for UPP to make it work. So this year we're running a shortened program. So we've reviewed the duration and we've changed it from 20 weeks down to 15 weeks. We've organised online HSC subject support package. So this is really helping to tutor students across 2 subjects where they feel they need help over a period of 13 weeks. So we've really taken it out of the responsibility of the mentors to do that subject tutoring, and we're doing it in a different way through InspireEd. We've switched up our content, focused heavily on cultivating essential post-school skills. So that really strong focus on employability trends and skills, pathways information, financial literacy, resume writing, all the really important things when you graduate from high school. And the format is a 30-minute lecture that's usually presented by UAW staff, followed by an hour-long mentor session where approximately 10 to 20 students join a breakout room that's facilitated by 2 mentors. So they talk through the lecture content, they finish up some activities that they've been set through the week on Moodle, and they have a chance to have an informal chat with their mentors and ask any questions to find out more about university. In terms of the key benefits for the students, we had already made commitments to students as part of the admissions process before COVID hit. So some of those benefits haven't changed. We obviously need to honour those. So we'd already committed to offering students who complete the program either an admissions interview or a conditional offer to study at UOW through our early admissions program. And we also offer assistance to students around the UAC application process. So it's not just about UOW, it's about really navigating that UAC system so that they're confident to apply for degrees that they want to do wherever they want to study. We also run a mock English exam as an optional extra for UPPs. So it's not an essential thing that they need to do, but in their school holidays, they can log in and do an English exam, either for advanced or standard English. And the papers will be marked by HSC markers. So feedback is provided to the students a number of weeks before they actually sit their big serious HSC English exam. And that means that they can really use that feedback to try and improve the results of that exam. So Kylie touched earlier on the fact that we have a really broad audience of students. That really comes from the broad, I guess, geographical locations of UOW and our campuses. They have a really diverse set of needs. Sometimes it's location based, and sometimes it's just the fact that we're out with 500 different students. So to help address this, we asked a number of questions as part of the application process, such as whether students had access to IT, computers or the internet. So we know that particularly in some of the regional areas, this is a challenge for students. And at the regional campuses, whether students had access to come onto campus if they were having some internet issues, just as a backup option. We also asked if they had specific learning needs that we needed to take into consideration as part of the program. And then we really tried to support our students throughout the enrolment process. So we know that the enrolment process can be really confusing for students, particularly Moodle. So we proactively reached out to students every step to walk them through the enrolment process. And staff were amazing from the outreach team. They were answering calls and emails pretty much 24/7 to make sure that this happened. And they were really busy with inquiries. We've touched on the presence of mentors in the program. They're an absolute essential part of the UPP. Creating that contact between the UPP students and the university and really understanding that first-hand experience of the mentors is a really core part of the program. And in terms of content, we had some large shifts in how we organised and presented it. Working through Zoom and Moodle has presented some challenges, but what it actually meant was that we could really focus the content. We could really make sure that we were offering 15 weeks of really fantastic, useful content that we could co-design with our mentors and get feedback on. So that was a great opportunity for us, I guess, to make sure that that content was really engaging for our UPP students. We achieve the structured content through the duration of the program by creating a predictable routine for students. So they have regular times for their lectures and their mentor sessions, and they also work through self-paced modules in their own time. So we track where the students are engaging each week as part of the program. They've got tasks that they need to complete to meet the requirements of the program, so we can reach out to those who aren't engaging to really start that dialogue about what's going on and whether or not we can step in to assist them. And we've built in weekly evaluation forms, in the form of pulse checks. So we'll talk through that a little bit further in a minute. And we've heavily collaborated with lots of units across UOW, so that's been really important to the success of the program. We really heavily involve our faculties for degree information and academic content, and we also involve our Student Services Division, and that's really just to make sure that we're not doubling up on activity, that we're promoting each other's programs. Often we speak to the same careers advisors and the same contacts at high school, so it's really important that we do work with our Student Services Division to make sure that we're all on the same page. And we also make sure that we link our Indigenous students with the Wollongong Indigenous Centre here at UOW.
Yeah, I think they're all really good points, Meg. And I think one of the things that we felt when we were heading down this road 2 months ago was that whilst we'd all had experience in designing educational programs for students before, I wouldn't say that any of us were experts in designing online educational programs. And so we really looked to see what guidelines and what frameworks were out there for practice in a remote online learning environment. And so each of these points that Meg's just spoken through have been adapted from Kathy Stone's National Guidelines for Online Learning. And one of the things I think that we did identify when we did look at those guidelines was the fact that that those guidelines were developed for a current student audience. And so when Meg was working with the team, we kind of came up with other design considerations that were quite specific to the outreach and widening participation space that we really needed to factor in the design of our programs.
Yeah, so we realised that parents, were really feeling the pressure of their children learning in a new environment. So we've really developed specific parental engagement strategy to help support those parents and really help them engage with their kids as much as possible. So we found that there was like a real appetite for parents to be looped into the conversation. And as a result, we created a series of EDMs, so electronic mail outs basically to the parents of our UPP students. And they went out on a weekly basis. And that was really like a recap of what their children were learning as part of the UPP in that week. And they had some top tips around how to start conversations around that content with their kids over the weekend potentially. We also developed 5 Zoom workshops, so we're inviting parents from all across the region to take part in these Zoom workshops in term 2. And it's really just breaking down like what the world of work in the 21st century looks like. It's really different for parents now to think about, you know, what their kids are going to be, what challenges their kids are going to be facing in the future, the fact that they're going to have multiple careers. So really just trying to demystify the process of university applications and UAC, and really starting to talk about like realistic expectations around careers heading into the future. Taking that place-based approach was really important to the program. So although we've, you know, previously we developed this baseline program that was delivered, you know, in a uniform way across the weeks, you know, we've still done that. We've still got this baseline program that has real consistency across the campuses, but we've also realised that you can't just, you know, one shoe doesn't fit all in terms of the students at our campuses. So we've really given the campuses permission on certain weeks to open the discussion up, and really tailor their content to the students in their area. So for example, you know, in BEGA, we know that there's a lot of talk around that leaving home, basically. So what are your options about studying away from home, or what are your options if you choose to stay in the area and the community and study here at this regional campus? And also, you know, taking that really flexible approach with the regional campuses. So they've been really impacted by bushfires, particularly on the far south coast. So we needed flexibility in attendance, advice about financial options, gap year advice, all the really important stuff. We really had to maintain our commitment to the widening participation agenda in an increasingly pressurised environment. So it could have been very easy for our programs to be viewed as a recruitment pipeline activity for the Student Services Division. So we had to be really clear about our objectives and push back sometimes on the institution around what we would and wouldn't do as part of the programs. So protecting the integrity of the content and protecting the integrity of the delivery was really important to us. And ensuring that we spoke about applications into higher education in a really broad sense was important. So we've included VET and TAFE in everything that we do, talking about UAC in a broad sense and supporting students if, you know, they want to put in applications to other higher education providers. You know, that's part of what we do. And really building that connection to higher education is, like I said, at the core of the UPP program. So maintaining that in an online environment was one of our key objectives. The simple experience of talking to a mentor week in, week out, and, you know, them being able to describe their university experience and even their high school experience and transitioning from high school into university is really important. We really need them to, you know, 16 and 17-year-olds are looking for role models that they can really relate to, who've gone through the whole process. So that really kind of starts to break down that level of intimidation around asking questions. And historically, we've seen some really strong relationships being built out of those mentoring relationships. So this is a snapshot of the 2020 cohort for UPP. 574 Year 12 students is on a par with previous years when you compare all of the campuses. So Wollongong has continued to perform pretty strongly. We've obviously seen a little bit of drop off in the South Coast campuses for obvious reasons around bushfires and some of the other challenges facing those communities at the moment. 63 high schools is actually an increase. We're up 5 schools compared to 2019. So that's fantastic news for us. And some of these are from areas that just wouldn't have been able to engage with UPP previously because it was such a physical on-campus experience. So we've now got students from Tamworth and areas of the Central West taking part in the UPP who wouldn't have been able to participate previously. So that's really exciting for us. The number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students this year is pretty consistent with previous years, saw a small uplift of about 1%. And again, for first in family students, it's pretty consistent. We had a small uplift of around 2.5% this year. So all in, we've had, I think, an exceptional rate of uptake for the program this year. Students have really demonstrated their desire for HSC support. And I think, you know, that's really important. They're really proactively seeking help at this time. So using our new tech skills, because we're also digitally advanced at the moment now, we've produced a couple of Vox Pop videos to give you a really great insight into how our mentors and Year 12 students have reacted to the move into the online space for UPP. We probably don't have enough time to show them both to you, but you can watch them in your own time. But we will show you one, which is our student perspective video.
the benefit of having UPP delivered through Zoom at the moment as compared to other years is, even though we are lacking that like in-person contact, we tend to collaborate a bit more because we've got more access to resources, and we feel more comfortable because we are in an environment that we're aware, like we are aware of our surroundings and we feel comfortable, whether that's in our room, in our study, so on and so forth. And I feel like as well, there's kind of no way of hiding in these Zoom calls. Like, you need to interact to show that you're present and to reap the rewards that are set out. And so yeah, I've enjoyed really bouncing off of each other, and
it's much better than I expected it to be. Like, in regards to the online delivery, I was kind of expecting more so of like kind of what the larger Zoom sessions are made of. So like, you guys kind of just talk to us, we just sit there, listen, absorb the information. But I feel like just having the whole, like Katrina said, the interaction between everyone, I think that's been really good considering the circumstances. And yeah, I feel like it's a lot more convenient in some aspects, just like not having to travel and whatnot. It's easier to complete everything like through Zoom. The only con would be just the technology, like in the sense that there's so many variables and things that can possibly go wrong for the hundreds of people that participate in the program. So there's like, it can't be perfect for everyone in that sense. Like, UOW has made it easier just like with flexibility and leniency, in the sense that, like, I know personally I had technical difficulties this afternoon in trying to get online, and you guys made sure that I was still like marked here and I had completed my work, and just having like other support services like the Facebook page and the ability to privately message mentors.
UOW has always provided sufficient information, constant promotion. It's not something where it's like you see it on a flyer and then you forget about it. It's like, oh, oops, I forgot to apply for that. It's constantly reminding you because they want you to be engaged with the idea of higher education, and understanding that it's not as intimidating as it seems. And I feel like through partaking in these programs in particular, my transition into university will probably be a lot smoother.
So the whole fact, it feels like there's been an effort to kind of diversify the modes that you're actually delivering things to. Like last week, we got the week off, which was not a Zoom call. It was we go through and watch videos and respond to that. It works better for the people who might not respond as well to video and interaction as they might actually sort of a video learning process, which I thought was really nice.
So I give praise to the program. I also have to give kudos to like my mentors as well, because if they weren't as open and willing to share their experiences and share their knowledge and I guess take on board what us as students have to say or are concerned about, then we wouldn't be able to have this interaction and to be corroborating on ideas.
I feel like I expected it from the physical gathering, but having the online gatherings, I feel like we have kind of interacted a lot more like with you mentors, but with my peers as well. Like, I feel like just conversing online, it's like we've kind of established a little bit of like a relationship in that sense, where we're kind of getting along and like as well as we can given the circumstances. So I didn't really expect that.
For me personally, I found Zoom calls are actually a very effective way of doing that, especially through like being able to see everyone at once, and it in some ways actually enhances that conversation. I know it's nothing like physical conversation, but it has been quite good given the circumstances.
All the information, like the abundance of knowledge that every student is receiving at the moment by partaking in this course, that individual investigative nature of this program and of the modules provided, it's been very, very helpful, and I feel like it's a wealth of knowledge that's handed to us simply through a Moodle page.
Awesome. So it was really nice to hear some of that feedback from the students. I think, you know, what really shone through there for me was that ability to still connect with their peers and their mentors, even though, you know, we are in this really challenging online environment. And I think that's, like I said, that was a core part, that was a core objective of the UPP to begin with, always has been. So I think it's really nice to see that continue. Sorry, just YouTube is deciding to continue its play. So while we're talking about feedback, the next slide that we're talking about is the evaluation of the program. And what's been great about it, about moving into this online context, is that we have been able to introduce these. I'm just going to let Kylie come out of that screen. So yeah, we've been able to introduce these weekly kind of check-ins with students because it's obviously really easy through online to do that. So these sort of pulse checks are small questions that we ask every week of our students. So we do it through Qualtrics, and we ask them a series of anywhere from 3 to 4 questions. Obviously, it's really hard to deliver content through Zoom, as some of you probably know. You can't read the room, you can't see body language, and you can't see if students are taking notes. In fact, a lot of the time for us, we can't even see if the student is there because they've turned off their sound and their camera, because, you know, as I said earlier, we're working with students who have internet problems, who have bandwidth issues, or maybe they have a messy bedroom that they just don't want to show the world. So, you know, getting that instant reaction from students can be very difficult. So we introduce these really quick pulse checks, as we call them. They're embedded into the weekly content, as I said, through Qualtrics, and we try to use sort of fun ways to measure it. So we have smiley faces, thermometers, polls, and it's really a temperature gauge for us to see how the students are feeling about the program. What's really great about these checks is the ability to be super responsive really quickly. So if we use the above graph as an example, students here were asked to rate their satisfaction with last week's content using an emoji face. It's quite expressive. It can go from a grumpy frown at number 1, meaning very unhappy, to a gleeful smile at number 5, which means that they're very satisfied. And it's great here to see that most of our students were pretty happy, and the response was pretty positive. But if we saw in a particular week that this graph was the opposite, we'd be able to respond really quickly to find out what that issue is. And this, I think, will end up probably changing our approach to evaluation in the long term, and really changing our practice to this more interactive model, rather than, you know, previously we've relied on pre-surveys and post-surveys and then really extrapolating content from those, or, you know, qualitative feedback from those to make program improvements. This just means that we're able to improve things on the fly. So here are just a couple of responses from last week's survey, and what's interesting is that much of the positive feedback from this year echoes previous years in terms of the student experience. So, you know, students are really enjoying the opportunity to connect with other students, to connect with their mentors, to find out more about university life, pathway options, and that idea of self-discovery. So that really came through strongly, I think, in that student video as well. You know, at its heart, the UPP is all about building confidence, so it's great to see that we've been able to maintain the integrity of that. In terms of the negative feedback, I think there are some obvious challenges that we're facing, and, you know, it's clear to see that students are still really craving that face-to-face nature of learning as well. And here are just some more comments about what students are looking forward to learning about, which is happily covered in our upcoming modules in UPP, so that's good. So in terms of reflection for the program, we had a number of highlights and challenges that really came out of the program. I think Kylie and I are both going to speak to this slide. But I think for me, you know, what really came out strongly as a highlight for this program was the collaboration between the campuses. You know, it can be very, like I said, we had 6 different programs kind of running fairly individually across the different campuses for UAW. And what we were able to do really quickly was to get the program leads from all of those campuses together in a working group at the beginning of this program, and really make sure that we were redeveloping UPP in a format and a structure that would work across all of the campuses for our students.
Yeah, sorry, my video's not working, Meg, but I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's been really interesting. I think in terms of, like I said, the student interaction. Obviously, they're still craving that face to face, but I think the other aspects that's been a bit of a challenge as well has been trying to manage. Was really trying to kind of manage that shift to remote working. And to that shift out of that kind of face-to-face workspace for the team themselves. So I think that was something that we really had to be conscious of, that while we were, ensuring the program relevance and that the programs could continue in this remote learning environment, we also needed to provide some professional development to the team, and we also needed to provide professional development we had to invest in our own professional development as well to really upskill our digital skills. But we definitely saw an increase in workload on the team whilst they're learning those skills, shifting everything to a remote learning environment and having those kind of institutional and school-based conversations.
In terms of some of the other challenges, that we faced when we really kicked off the program, the communications with schools. So we weren't able to collaborate with them as easily as we usually would, remind them that the program was open or let them know how their student numbers were tracking. So that was definitely challenging. That said, we had some amazing careers advisors who were working around the clock, even when the school holidays were on. So we were able to keep some of those channels open. And the technical side, so Moodle, I think, can be a challenging platform for seasoned students, let alone brand new students who are still in high school. So being able to navigate enrolment and Moodle was really a pretty big step for some of these Year 12 students. So not being able to be there and physically hold their hand through the process was definitely presented a challenge for the team. I think I mentioned earlier, the team are on call pretty much 24/7 through the enrolment process, and coming back to Kylie's earlier point of the staff load and workload and wellbeing, that probably impacted on that, heavily as well. And internet access, so particularly in the regional areas, the far south coast of New South Wales has had a really rough trot over the, for 2020. And those are where we find we have students who a lot of the time are in the most need for these kind of programs. So making sure that students had access to devices and to internet, we knew would be a challenge for the program as well.
So I think what we want to leave you with at the end of the presentation today is a few tips for design from our perspectives and our learnings from designing widening participation and outreach activities for a remote learning environment, as well as onboarding and continue to maintain the support of your institution as well. And so I think some of the things that we've taken away, and obviously, speaking with our colleagues across the sector quite regularly at the moment in terms of what they're doing in terms of their own widening participation practice, we know that some of these things are at the front of your minds as well. So, I think it was really quite clear talking to the students, to continue to build those really strong connections between the mentors and the students involved in the programs themselves. And it was actually really interesting while the students were doing those video interviews, you didn't see all of that in the video, but they were having a joke around with each other. They were ribbing each other a little bit. They'd really developed that rapport even in that online space. And particularly because a lot of our mentors are being drawn from our local schools and our local regions, that instant connection, I think, has been really, really important in that remote learning environment. The other thing, as Meg spoke to earlier, is ensuring that our programs continue to be contextualised to the students in our regions. So we know that the students that we're working in within Liverpool, for example, have very different needs and want different things to what the students need in terms of who are located at our Bega campus. And so really, I think one of the things that has been fantastic about the way that the teams approach this is that instead we've been building these things into the program design, right into the fundamental core program design, but we've also been you know, we've got different content happening in different regions to meet the needs of those students. We've been responsive to student needs by putting them at the front and the centre. So I think we've been really careful to ensure that the program isn't rigid, and that through these really regular pulse checks, that we're adapting the program content to what the students are telling us that they need over the 15 weeks of their engagement. And I think the parental and teacher engagement has been really, really critical as well. And so it's been really interesting when we've been running these Zoom sessions with parents. We asked them why they're actually coming along to these Zoom sessions and having a chat with us. And the resounding response from parents really has been, well, my child has committed to their learning, so I wanted to show them that I was committed to their learning as well. And so, as Meg said, there's been a real appetite for parents in this really unknown, very confusing space, which has been more convoluted by COVID and by the bushfire situation. Parents are also feeling they need a space to have these conversations and have that support as well. And as Meg said, even though we recognise the pressure that it's put on the team, they've done a fantastic job in terms of just providing that support to students. So we really couldn't speak more highly of the team in terms of how they've delivered this program and how they've supported the students over the last 8 weeks. It's shown a real commitment to putting students first. Some of the other things in terms of maintaining the support of the institution that we found quite useful as well has been really tying everything that we're doing back to the research, and not just the research that has been done in WPO that we're all very familiar with, but tying it back to research that's happening right now around COVID and schools and the disadvantage that remote learning is presenting to students from equity backgrounds in primary and high schools. So like I said earlier, the Department of Education commissioned a range of research that was presented a few weeks ago. So really being able to draw on quite rich recent research has been really, really important for us, as well as some research done by some community organisations such as the Smith family as well. So some of the research that's been presented is that, that this current situation is really impacting on students' motivation for learning and also how they see their post-school future. And so we've had to be we really see our role as a university to support, to work with TAFE, to work with VET, to work with the schools. And it's a really collaborative partnership approach to how we support students in our region to be able to continue to persist in really quite a challenging environment at the moment. What we've also done is we've provided the senior executive with the argument. So we've linked it to the institutional priorities. We've linked it to with the senior executive. We've given them the argument to continue outreach. So they didn't have to come up with it themselves. We provided the documentation that they need so that they can continue to advocate for continuing this work in a highly pressurized environment. And to be honest, we've been very lucky at UOW that we've got very strong support from our senior executive with the work that we do in this space. We've actively sought out collaboration with other areas of the university as well. And so it hasn't been, we've really worked with other areas of the university to ensure that we're doing this as a collaborative approach across the institution so that we're not inundating schools with duplication of activity. And, we've been promoting the good news stories and the early wins as well. So, in terms of, we've been providing weekly reports on student engagement in the whole suite of our programs up to the senior executive, but we've also been really promoting the engagement and some of the things that the teachers and the students have done in the local communities as well. So that's been really, really important. So they're just a few tips, I guess, from our experience, and we know that there's a lot of expertise in the room today, and that you guys have your own experiences, and so more than happy to kind of stop at this point and really take on any questions.
Oh, thank you, Kylie, and thank you, Meg. I'm sure everyone will agree that was just the most terrific presentation. We've had an enormous amount of interaction on chat, and we've had some really interesting questions that are still coming in, but I'm going to start by asking one of you. A lot of questions have come in about the mentors. So these have ranged from approximately how many mentors you have, what kind of training do you do with the mentors, and actually one question which is around how do you manage the communication between the mentors and the high school students?
Do you want to take that, Meg, or do you want me to jump in and you fill in the gaps?
Well, I'll try and answer it. Perhaps you can fill in the gaps of the things that I missed. But so we have approximately we have mentors on the books for all of the campuses. So each campus will recruit their own student mentors. So in total, we probably have around 80 to 90 mentors across all campuses. They're obviously current students, and we undertake an interview process with them, before we make them an offer of becoming a mentor. And then we undertake some pretty significant training with them across mandatory reporting, privacy, how to interact with students, what our programs are about. And most of them come from equity backgrounds or from our inter-uni partner schools. So that's really important because they have that lived experience that they can then share with the students that we work with. Just trying to think, there were so many questions within that. So that kind of covers the training and the number that we have. In terms of the communication, how we communicate with our mentors, we have Facebook, we have a Facebook group set up for the mentors, and we tend to, we're in pretty regular contact with them through that. We also have weekly wraps that we send on a Friday to our whole mentor force, and that really has upcoming opportunities. Wraps up the week, lets them know what's coming up in terms of the UPP program. And in terms of them communicating with the high school students, we're really strict about that. So the seminar or the opportunity for them to interact is really in that Zoom session, and it starts and it ends there. So we facilitate any other communication or any other questions outside of that through Moodle. There's a separate Facebook group that's set up for the UPP students of 2020. But we ask all of our mentors to set their social media settings to private so that, they can't be sought out by certain high school students. They don't friend them on social media. We're really strict about really making sure that there is, that there are lines in the sand around what that relationship is.
Yeah, all of those platforms are moderated as well. So one of probably the key things is that we actually enroll the students at the university, so they have full access to our learning platform. So they're all moderated by UOW staff. And that's probably just another tip as well, is I think one of the fundamental things, because we pay our mentors, all of our mentors are from identified targeted equity backgrounds. And that's been another kind of, I guess, really key argument that we have really fleshed out with our senior executive, is that this is part of a retention strategy as well for our mentors, and a financial support strategy that we can engage equity students in paid meaningful employment during a time that where hospitality and other employment prospects have potentially dropped off for some of these students.
Yeah, really good point, particularly in the current financial climate. A couple of questions here around whether you're going to continue with this blended approach. Do you see this as something that is now embedded in your practice?
Yeah, I think we're open to really pulling the whole UPP program apart and rebuilding it after COVID. I think there are definite benefits to face-to-face learning and teaching, but we've obviously seen some fantastic benefits of taking the program online. So I think that blended approach to it is definitely something we'll be looking at in future, particularly the fact that taking it online really does allow us to open up opportunity for some students who haven't previously had the chance to take part in the UPP. I think that's a really important part. Or a big learning for us, and like I said, one of the really surprising highlights for us in terms of getting the program up online this year.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to try for 2 more questions before we finish up. A couple of people have written in and said, how many people are on your team?
Enough.
Well, it's actually quite interesting, to be honest, because when I look across the sector, our outreach team is actually quite small. So located in Wollongong, and I think the other thing to keep in mind is we've given you a snapshot today of one program that we've run during COVID, but the team's actually been running multiple programs during this period. So located in Wollongong, we have about 6.5 full-time staff dedicated to outreach, but like I said, we're running multiple programs, and then we've got fractions of staff located at our regional and metropolitan campuses who've worked with us to develop this. But I would say we're not a large team, but they're very productive and very committed team.
Okay, and one last question. We've got someone who's asked that they often struggle with parents engaging in activities. And is there something that any advice you can provide to increase parental engagement online, and maybe some of the steps you took to maximize this engagement?
Yeah, look, I think this is actually a really interesting point, because we're actually collaborating at the moment with University of Tasmania to undertake some research on this. It's funded by the National Centre, so thank you, Sarah. Yeah. But I think some of the strategies that we've implemented have been, we've gotten students to write home to their parents to say why, in some of the programs, to say why they would like their parents involved in the program. So it's been a bit of a hearts and minds strategy that we've really used. But I think particularly like that parental engagement over the last 10 years has been a challenge for us as well. But I think what we've seen is that this environment that we're in at the moment, it's allowed us to deliver parental engagement in new ways. It's also, we're also seeing that parents are really wanting that support at the moment as well. So I don't think at the moment we've got the silver bullet, but certainly we'd be really keen to share some of the NESHE funded research of what comes out of this year with the sector to really find out what we've learned in that space. But they're probably some of the initial emerging learnings that we're seeing.
That's great. Look, I'd just like to thank you both again. It's been a terrific presentation, very quick and yet with such great insights. I think a lot of people, and certainly what's been indicated on the chat, is that people have got some real take-home messages. To let everyone know that we are recording the session, we will put it up on the NESHE website, and we'll also include some additional materials, and we'll talk to you, Meg and Kylie, about those a little later on. So if anyone has not yet registered for our e-newsletter or is not familiar with the National Centre, can I encourage you to go and have a look at our site online. And also thank you to ADSET for their support in helping us bring you these webinars as well. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. It was great to share our knowledge with you, and feel free to reach out to us as well. Meg and I are more than happy to have a chat to everyone, and also if anyone wants to collaborate or share any learnings, we're really open to that as well. So
yeah. Thanks Sarah. Thanks everyone for watching.